Hello and welcome to the Q&A for November 2023. And you've got questions, I've got answers, so let's get started. Our first question is from Bleeding, and they say, hypothetically, in a world where Uzuki and the dev team got the time to work on YBA and actively did content updates / balance changes, would you just outright quit TCA and return to YBA? No. Absolutely not. Are you joking? I don't know how. I guess there's a lot of people on the channel, and I mean, the numbers speak for it, so it does make sense. But I suppose there's a lot of people on the channel that don't actually watch a lot of the TCA videos I do, and because of that, they don't really understand my stance on TCA and my stance on YBA. But here's the thing. TCA, I'm pretty heavily involved in right now, behind the scenes, so a lot of my input and feedback is taken into consideration. It directly contributes to what happens with updates, and I basically have some creative control over there, which is really cool. I also think that the gameplay of the game itself is significantly more fun. The hitboxes are more consistent. I will die on that hill, and maybe that'll be a video in of itself, because a lot of people think I'm crazy, and I know I'm not, and I can prove it, but that's a story for another day. But the hitboxes are more consistent. The gameplay itself and what it centers around, the whole M1-based combat and not just mashing buttons the whole time. Those kinds of things that old YBA sort of represented that they've thrown away in the interest of bringing, you know, whatever the hell the current combat system is into light. Yeah, those things make me not really enjoy YBA nearly as much as I did before. And I think even if I went back in time and you gave me the choice between old YBA or current TCA, I still don't know if I'd pick old YBA, because old YBA had a lot of the same problems that I think it has today that are just further pushed forward by the changes in combat. So it's more clear the problems that it had before, and TCA actually works to resolve those problems, whereas YBA just chooses to ignore them and put more flashy stuff on the screen. So like, if they were actively developing and not making you wait 4 months for an update, not a whole lot would change on that front. You would be getting more stands, and even if they released without one combos, they would still be button mash fest. It's not like they're going to remove a bunch of moves. And even if the balance was absolutely perfect in the current state of the game, I don't enjoy the current state of the game, even using the things that are quote-unquote balanced. So no, I would not just outright quit, because I enjoy what I've been doing. Clockworker Money says, do you think that TCA will ever have a big enough update to push it into the spotlight it deserves? Loved the boat. There's no boat streams. The fucking boat guy's back. But do I think that TCA will ever have a big enough update to push it into the spotlight? I don't really think that that's what's going to make a difference here. So the short answer is no. I will say that we have a pretty substantial thing coming, which is why it's taken a hot minute now. By the time you see this, you'll probably be thinking, what the hell is taking them so long? And I think you'll see, because it's some pretty significant stuff. So if there was anything that was going to suddenly push us, you know, forward and not leave us in basically the same spot all the time, it would be the update that's coming, and I'm sure you'll see why. But if that doesn't work, then no, I don't think that anything will. I think what it really ends up coming down to is there's a lot of Roblox algorithmic stuff in charge here, or going on here, and I can use an easy example to cite for that, which is the latest Attack on Titan Revolution. That game got a massive influx of players, despite it being like just not very good. Like it's not really that much worse, but it's certainly not any better than any of the current games on Attack on Titan right now. So in other words, it has a lot of similarities with TCA. In my opinion, there's a lot of things that TCA does better than the things in the genre, but it's the same sort of deal with like less content but higher quality, or at least an attempt at higher quality, right? And despite that, Attack on Titan Revolution like exploded overnight and had like 9,000 people playing it at one time, and TCA hasn't even come close to having 9,000 people playing it at one time. So I think there's some stuff going on behind the scenes, because I can say for certain that it's not that the game is just shit or people just hate the game. That's definitely not it. There's got to be something going on that's not directly related to that, because stuff like Attack on Titan Revolution doesn't just happen overnight for no reason. Young C4604 asks, will you expand more on other games, such as maybe The Last of Us? Assuming you haven't played the masterpiece, it has one of the most immersive gameplays along with its sequel. Perhaps more horror games with friends would be awesome. Would love to see you try out such games and wish you well for the future. Well, trying to do other games is difficult, as I always say, usually on these Q&As, to be honest with you. Trying out other games is difficult because it's almost a crapshoot on whether or not it'll do well. Like, there are certain games where I have a pretty good hunch that they'll do all right or do pretty well, and then there are other games where I know for certain that posting it is just going to flop and it's going to fail. Like, that will happen. There's not really any room for interpretation. And I can say for certain that The Last of Us is one of those games where if I played it on the channel, that would fail hard. I know, 100%. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. So that will not be on the channel. But it is one of those games that I know is really good, and I have not played it, so it's sort of on my never-ending backlog of games. I know everyone's got one of those. So yeah, do I want to play it at some point? Probably. Will I play it on the channel? Almost certainly not, because it would just be a waste of my time. Breaking Bones asks, since the YBA Sticky Fingers / 1v1 rework is still not here, shocker, I'd rather ask a question about TCA. So, do you think that adding a new spec would be a good idea, or do you think the current amount of specs is a perfect amount until more stands get added? If so, what are some vague ideas you have for some new specs? I personally would find the real knife from Undertale a pretty cool spec if it was done right. Yeah, specs. I think adding more is great, generally speaking, pretty much all the time. Specs are great, and one of those things that really got underutilized in YBA, how they just kind of stopped adding them completely, because specs basically completely change how you play certain stands or how you play the game, and for all intents and purposes, they're usually not that hard to make, because if they're supporting the stand, like they should be, then you've got something that has less moves and less mechanics built around it, but they interact differently with the environment, and you can sort of combine them with different stands and make cool combinations. So no, I don't think that we should kind of linger around the amount of specs in TCA we have, and we're not going to, so that's good news. I can tell you that the next spec in development is boxing, and I can tell you that because it was revealed on the Discord. It's not going to be YBA boxing or really anything similar. It's supposed to be a more grounded sort of take on boxing, which is kind of weird in a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure game, but that's what Peter wanted to do, and so that's what he's going to do. Outside of boxing, personally, I wanted to see a Buster Sword Cloud Final Fantasy VII spec because I'm kind of a loser, and I really like that game, and I think it would be cool, but I doubt we'll see anything like that, although it would be pretty badass. There's a ton of things that can be done with specs. I think your idea of the knife from Undertale could work. That, like, you can basically make anything work. You could have Tiger Uppercut as a spec. Like, that's an option. You know, Sagat spec, why not? But yeah, looking forward to the future of specs in TCA, because we're hopefully going to have quite a few of them. Vinegar Vamp asks, have you ever had any interest in the Monster Hunter series? The playstyle is similar to Dark Souls, and I'm curious if you looked into that sort of thing. Keep up the good work on the videos, great quality. Thank you, Vinegar Vamp. Monster Hunter, not really. I know about it, and I have the understanding of like these massive boss fights that take a really long time to complete. I will say you kind of failed yourself by saying the playstyle is similar to Dark Souls, as I am resident Dark Souls hater, number one. No, I don't have a problem with Dark Souls gameplay. I have a problem with a lot of other problems with Dark Souls, but we've talked about that ad nauseum at this point. But regardless, Monster Hunter, not really super interested in it. I don't know, just I can't really explain why. It's just not on my radar as much as other games are. So I doubt I'll ever really end up playing it. And I can also tell you that there's zero chance that that would be on the channel, because that's another one of those that will fail games. So yeah, don't expect Monster Hunter either from me playing it or definitely not playing it on the channel. Next question's from Unknown XG7ET, and they say, do you think Battlefield will be seen in a more positive light? I replayed Battlefield 1 recently, and it seemed outstanding compared to 2042. By the way, thanks for recommending TCA. The game is good, but since the player count is too low, I can only play main game and 1v1s against the same person over and over again. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I know, trust me, I know. Do I think Battlefield will be seen in a more positive light? Well, I don't know, quite honestly. There's been a lot of news going around about Battlefield 5, especially on Steam, because it was on sale, and apparently it broke a bunch of records. So I don't think it's ever really been that Battlefield is not a game that doesn't have an audience or doesn't interest people. I think it absolutely does, and I don't even think that Battlefield as a series is looked on in a bad light. I think it's more so that Battlefield 2042 particularly was looked on in a bad light. And I don't really know if that's going to recover completely, but it's gotten up there for sure. There's a lot less just blind 2042 hate, and there's some people that actually enjoy it, like myself, but I'm biased because I've been playing it forever. Personally, I don't really like Battlefield 1 that much. I don't like the World War setting. I don't think the gameplay works super well, all things considered. It's just not super fun to me, and I enjoyed 2042 a lot more, but that's all subjective at the end of the day. I will say I think what it's really going to come down to is the next release. I think 2042 is pretty much just sort of holding people over until the next game, and I'm honestly also on that list. I'm really looking forward to the next game for a lot of reasons. And I think that I'm hoping that for the sake of the rest of the Battlefield community, that they'll take a few steps back to look at where Battlefield 2042 actually went wrong versus where 2042 went wrong according to quote-unquote the community, and give us a sort of middle ground between classic Battlefield and 2042. Because while I think that the game would almost certainly perform well if they just took the old Battlefield formula and basically copy-pasted Battlefield 4 and put it out, I think a lot of people would be happy with that. But me personally, I wouldn't be happy with that, because I think innovation is important to games, and if you release the same game every year without even trying to change things up, then, well, you're in trouble. I'm of the opinion that Battlefield 2042 dropped the ball because they basically just forgot a lot of things that the previous Battlefields had, and just either chose to ignore them and put them on the back burner in order to focus on their new stuff. And I think a lot of their new stuff worked. Like, I like the way that vehicles work. A lot of people disagree with me on this, but I like the fact that you can sort of pick between a bunch of vehicles in a different category. I think that's really cool and adds to a lot of variety on all the different maps across vehicles. I liked the specialist system, which is my biggest hot take. I think it was really interesting to have that extra level of customization. I think we could have done without the sort of personalities of the operators, and I think that itself rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But when it comes to the actual gameplay of specialists themselves, I think they worked out great. And I really genuinely believe that if they had launched 2042 under with the specialist gadgets and traits being like subclasses or something instead of calling them specialists, people would be way more open to them. So I'm hoping in the next game they'll do a sort of play on that, where you can pick your class and then you can sort of pick like a sub gadget or something that functions similar to how the specialist gadgets worked, but you can only pick one of them, that kind of thing. And I think that would work really well. But like I said, the problem with 2042 is that they just forgot stuff. Like, they launched without a scoreboard. I didn't really care. They did have a scoreboard, albeit not a traditional one at launch. But regardless, why would you do that? They launched with barely any meaningful destruction on a lot of the maps. I mean, it's hard to look at these giant skyscrapers that have absolutely nothing to destroy on them and think that there's really much of anything to work with there. Kaleidoscope is probably the easiest example. I don't know if there's a single building or structure on Kaleidoscope that can be demolished at all. That's just a failing on all fronts for the game. Destruction is a major part of Battlefield, so if you just ignore it or push it to the side like it is on certain maps like Hourglass, it doesn't really work out. I will say that too much destruction is really rough, and you can see that on maps like Erica Harbor from Battlefield Bad Company 2. If you've played that map, even on Battlefield 2042, where they ported over all the destruction, you'll very quickly notice that after the match has gone on for a little while, all the buildings are gone, everything is leveled, and as an infantry player, you have basically no cover and get obliterated. So they needed to strike that balance between having certain places that are immune to destruction, or immune enough to destruction that you could continue to go into them for cover as an infantry player, while also having enough buildings and destructible environments that it still remains interesting and feels like a Battlefield game. But 2042 went way too far in the everything should be indestructible, and, well, they failed. And I feel like I've went on long enough on this because nobody really cares about me talking about Battlefield, but I could talk all day about all the things that Battlefield 2042 just forgot about or decided to ignore that are integral to the Battlefield formula that basically screwed itself over and made a whole bunch of people hate systems that they otherwise probably would have liked just because they were jumping on a bandwagon. So yeah, future for the Battlefield franchise, hoping that they'll do a sort of middle ground between classic Battlefield and 2042, because I like the innovations there and I think that they can be implemented better. Next question is from Minty Boy. They say, hey Eclipse, just wanted to ask, what do you think is the hardest / most difficult things you've had to do as a beta tester for TCA? Besides that, keep up the great work. I hope to see more great content from you soon. Well, I think the hardest thing as a tester and part of the design team now, in case you didn't know, which is pretty cool, for TCA is really not testing the game at all. It's more so having to talk to people, ironically enough. But more specifically, having to accept sometimes when the input or feedback that you have is just outvoted, and you gotta take the L. Because there are some times where I'll have ideas or I'll say something and people will not like it, and that's just sort of the end of it. And there's a lot of times where I'll get stuck, and some of my other design team members have this problem as well. Some of them more so than me, to be honest. But we'll get on to trying to argue why our specific vision is better, and we'll just argue in circles, even though we're completely outvoted. And so the most difficult thing is realizing when your opinion or idea is unpopular and just accepting that it's not going to happen, or it's going to be implemented in a way that maybe you're not a fan of. I know that's not really like specific to testing, but I mean, that's the truth. That's the hardest thing or most difficult thing to do. All the testing stuff, generally speaking, isn't super complicated because it's no different than the kind of stuff that I would be doing anyways after updates came out a lot of the time. So, like, I'm already used to that. Checking active hitbox frames and stuff like that, that's things I already do. So, it's not super difficult. And inevitably, we're going to miss things, but we do the best we can. Next question is from Water Droplet TM72. They say, sup, wanted to ask if it was up to you 100%, which 2 stands would you want to see added in TCA in the coming year? Gotta say, I've been loving the game for the last 5 months, and just wanted to know what you thought would be interesting to have added in the future. Fingers crossed the game gets higher player count soon. So do I, Water Droplet. And I won't give you 2 stands. I'll give you, I don't know, just a few that come to my head. I'd really like to see Gold Experience Requiem. I'd really like to see Tusk Act 4. I'd really like to see the World Alternate Universe. I'd very much like to see Catch the Rainbow. I think that was really cool in Roblox's Unbreakable, and so I think that could work really well here. I want to see Silver Chariot / Silver Chariot Requiem, especially Silver Chariot Requiem, because I just sort of have a soft spot for that stand. I don't know, I think it's really cool. And finally, as a lame and boring take, I'd actually like to see Star Platinum over Heaven, because I feel like the world getting a whole bunch of variants and Star Platinum getting sort of shafted is lame. And also, I don't think I've ever played a game with the Star Platinum over Heaven. I know there's a bunch of them, but they're usually garbage. So if there was a game that had one, I think that would be cool that I actually played. I will give you a hint that one of those stands that I named is coming pretty soon. I don't think that's been leaked quite yet, so you'll have to be guessing as to which one of those that is. But I'm really excited for when it will come out because I think that you guys will be pretty happy with it. Next question's from Flame9029. They say, ever thought of making some sort of general guide on how to improve in TCA? Like maybe teaching some simple terms, like the details you see when you click on details of a skill in the skill tree, how mechanics work, how you're supposed to think while playing it all, since I think for a completely new player, there's kind of no way of learning how to play other than trying to copy what others do. This is one of those things that I was initially going to do for YBA, and I don't really think I ever did. Did I? A PvP guide for YBA? I'm pretty sure I never did. So we'll see. I think this is the kind of thing that would probably wait until TCA's got more people playing on it, so it can actually help more people. I made that TCA beginner's guide, but I think a PvP guide would be sort of in the same vein of that, and that, I don't know, it didn't feel like a total waste of my time because I know it'll help people, but it also is kind of soul-crushing putting out those guides and knowing it's not going to help very many people. So if I was going to do it, yeah, it'd probably be if there were more people playing the game. But I think there's a lot of things that I see new players, like mistakes that they make, and lack of understanding of certain moves and interactions and how people should generally be playing the game versus how they are. So I think this could get a lot of value if I decided to do it. So hopefully we'll see an influx of players at some point so I can feel more motivated to put together a real sort of guide of how to be mediocre in PvP, because that's really the best I can do. A lot of the getting better stuff is up to you, but there are a lot of just general rules of thumb that will automatically make you better than quite a few people just because of knowing them rather than actual execution of what's going on in front of you. And the final question of the day is from number 4493, and they say, what do you think when people say that your community is toxic, since they tend to follow along with your opinions, religiously attacking anyone opposing them in the process? I haven't seen a whole lot of this. I feel like this is the minority of people I hear from, but I'm also someone who's directly involved in my own community, so I think that probably just is always going to happen. Especially because I try to avoid toxicity, generally speaking, which if you've seen my videos, you might question that. You'll see me like cuss someone out in a 1v1 or something, or call someone an idiot in Daily Dose of Stupid, right? But at the end of the day, there are good reasons some things happen in those videos, and changes that I've made to try to avoid general toxicity. Like, I blur out or hide the names of the people in Daily Dose of Stupid, and I do that because people asked me to, because they said that people might get harassment, and I was like, hey, you're right. Let me try to avoid that if I can. And if you look at a lot of like bigger creators, and like I don't have examples off of the top of my head, but there's a lot of creators who like make fun of people, make fun of like Twitter accounts and stuff like that. And they'll always show the names. They don't hide anything. And I think that's a little bit messed up. I don't really feel super okay with that. I think to some extent, people do deserve to have like backlash for saying stupid shit on the internet, but I don't think that extent should be like 100,000 people going to them and being like, hey, you're an idiot. Unless you say something like really bad, like you're dropping slurs or something, then maybe you deserve that. But regardless, I try to be as non-toxic as possible. Anyone who knows about my TCA/YBA gang, they'll know that gang has a strict anti-toxicity rule where if you're a toxic jackass in the chat, you just get permanently banned. That's just how we do things. Like, that's not how it works there. So I try to foster a non-toxic environment whenever possible, and the toxicity that does go on here is usually tried to play for laughs. Like, if you see me getting overly angry at someone in 1v1s and calling them a fucking idiot and throwing out the middle finger, it's because I'm heated, and I usually try to put it in post and make myself look stupid because I think it's funny. Like that I'm getting overly angry at something because that's exactly what's happening. And so that's the way I try to portray it in my videos. I don't know if that always gets picked up, because I think it's important to sort of acknowledge when you've been, overly heated in a moment and look dumb. And sometimes there are times where I'm just too overly heated in a moment and I'll cut something out of a video completely because I just sound like a 10-year-old. Because like that stuff just sort of happens. In terms of people just blindly following along with my opinions and attacking anyone opposing them in the process, I've seen a fair amount of this, so I understand that it happens. I don't think that's a direct result of me or my community, though. I think that's more of just a YouTube, or not even a YouTube, but more of a public figure thing in general. You could see it in just general politics. A lot of people that just parrot whatever the politicians or whoever they support tell them to say or tell them to think, because it's easier to use somebody else's argument, then come up with your own, because, I mean, that's just the way things are. Now, that being said, I have seen the reverse of the coin, where people will agree with something I said for the exact same reasons that I said it, and they'll argue with people, and then those people's responses will be, you're just a drone, and you just agree with Eclipse because he's Eclipse. And I think a lot of the time that isn't true. I think generally speaking, I can make some pretty good points, and I don't see anything wrong with people hearing or seeing what I have to say and deciding based on what I've told them that they agree with me. So I think it's equally as unfair when people dismiss others' arguments that use my points as an excuse to sort of ignore what they have to say. Not to say that there aren't people who just don't use their brains whatsoever and just blindly follow anything I say, but still, you gotta give people a little bit more credit. And for the most part, to answer the question, I don't think that my community is directly toxic. Far from it, and I think that there are a lot of communities out there that are a hell of a lot worse, and they're a hell of a lot worse because they get enabled by the creators behind them, and I don't enable that stuff. Anyways, that was the last question of the day, so we're finishing up with the Q&A. A lot of really good questions this time around. I feel like I could really chill out and just sit here and talk about things on my mind. That Battlefield question was a killer. Sorry for those of you who hate or don't like Battlefield. That was probably a chore to listen to me talk about that. But that's what happens when I start talking about things I'm passionate about. That last question was pretty good. There's a lot of good ones in here, so hopefully that keeps up. But other than that, I don't really have anything else to say. So if you enjoyed the video, you liked the Q&A, you're looking forward to next month's or whatever my next video may be, you can leave a like and subscribe so you get notified when I post those. If you didn't, don't do those things. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time.